All right, so sorry about that, all ladies and gentlemen. We are back. Um, I'm hoping it's a little better. Um, I am hoping it's a tad better. Hang on a second. Okay, I think it's a little bit more stable now. Um, let's have a look here. Okay, I think we're good now. Um, I just tried. Perfect. Working a lot better. Excellent. Okay, so we are back. We have lost 12 minutes. So sorry about that all. That's technology for you. It can't be helped. But anyway, hi everyone. Really, really sorry about the tech difficulty. You probably noticed that the environment that I'm in at the moment is not the one you're used to. I'm actually on holiday at the moment in sunny Abu Dhabi. But I couldn't miss this live stream for anything. So, as you can imagine, the internet's a little bit touch and go. Um, but we've not lost too much time. We definitely have more than enough time to cover what I wanted to cover in today's session, which is going to be another exciting one. Um, in this session, we're going to talk a little bit about how we can use the learning style that works best for you to study more effectively. In the last few sessions, we've talked a little bit about the importance of ensuring that your environment is optimal, ensuring that the goals that you've set are very specific. And we've also talked a little bit about how positivity can make a huge difference in the student experience. Um, in any case, though, do take a seat, relax a little bit, and hopefully we don't have any more glitches. Fingers crossed, touch wood. Hope everyone's okay this evening. I know Isaac, Millie, and my tutor, you've already said hi, so thanks so much for joining me this evening. If there's anyone else that would also like to chat, by all means do so. Do get involved as well. Um, let's see. Fantastic. I think we're good so far. I think we're good. Right. Um, just because I'm aware of the fact that we've lost a little bit of time to tech difficulties, I might get started in just a couple of minutes, just to give a couple more people some time to join us this evening for another exciting study squad session. Um, let's have a look here. Let's see. How was everyone this evening? Is everyone okay? Hopefully everyone had a good day so far. Hopefully school's been good. Hopefully it's been productive. Hopefully you've already been able to incorporate some of the really cool tips and tricks that we've been talking about over the past couple of sessions. Before I get started, just a couple of really, really quick reminders. Number one, there will be a survey that goes out in the live chat really, really soon, maybe towards the end of the session. So do make sure to fill it in because there is a chance to win £20, which could be used on some really cool stationery to help you study more effectively or on anything you'd like. Additionally, do make sure to check out the other streamers. So we have two other study squads that happen every week. Olivia does one on Mondays on maths, and we have another tutor that does a brilliant study squad on coding. Fliss does that, and it's actually really, really interesting. I've actually been watching the coding ones as well because coding is actually quite interesting. So make sure to check out Olivia's stream and Fliss's stream. Olivia's Mondays at 5, Fliss Tuesdays at 5. So do make sure to check those ones out as well. Emma, you do not necessarily need to watch lessons 1 through 3. I've designed the series such that you can sort of dip in and out. You can watch what pertains to you, but I do encourage you to watch the other ones as well. It should hopefully give you a bit more context. But by all means, you can watch this one live and you can go back and watch the other ones after this live stream So don't at all feel like you're missing out on anything. Um, but no, you don't have to watch 1 through 3 before you watch this one. Not at all. Um, right. How's the music as well? Is the music too loud? Is it too quiet? Um, Hopefully, it's not too loud so you can't hear what I'm saying. Um, and hopefully, next week, while I'm still here, we won't have as many tech difficulties. I'll make sure to use some different settings that I did before. Okay. Let's see. All right, excellent. I think, just looking at the clock, let's get started with some content then. So, today's session is going to be all about identifying your learning style. If anyone joins throughout the stream, by all means, I will stop and say hi. If anyone has any questions, then by all means, do ask away. Some of your questions, hopefully, I'll answer there and then. But if you do have any more questions, then I will answer them in a nice little Q&A session at the end as well. But without further ado, let's get started. Let's have a look. So, learning styles. Okay. Now, what I like to do is I really love interaction. As for those of you who've already seen a few of my other ones, my other sort of streams, I'm a huge fan of asking questions. So, I'm going to leave the floor to all of you in a live chat. So just type as many things as you'd like, as many answers. I want you to tell me what some of the ways you learn are. Anything at all. There's no wrong answer whatsoever. So it could be writing notes, it could be watching YouTube videos, it could be a combination. So by all means, tell me what some of the ways you learn are. Sophia has said mind maps. Thank you for contributing, Sophia. And hi, glad to see that you're joining us this evening. Specifications as well. Love that. Specifications are really, really important. I actually have a session on using exam resources that I'll touch on that later on. The DIS expert, or the DI's expert. Flashcards, brilliant. That's another really good way to study. Emma has said textbooks. Good, going back to basics. Funnily enough, in my old room, I have some of my old AQA and NXL textbooks. Millie has said practical things. Okay. What are some of those practical things? Give me some examples. May, thanks for joining us this evening. You've said watching videos or writing out notes. Very good. I also do the same. Lyrics has said flashcards, copying stuff down and reading through it, then summarizing it and making notes of key points. Also, really good study technique there. And then the DI or the DIS expert. Okay, so blurting, so maybe sort of like talking, so maybe blurting things out, maybe. Okay. And then T. Worrell, past papers. So brilliant engagement, all of you. Once again, I appreciate all of you for joining, but I also appreciate all of you for contributing. It makes these live streams a lot more fun for both of us. So really, really glad that you all contributed. And a couple of extra ones in there as well. May has also said exam style questions. Another really viable way of studying. So that is fantastic. Now, as you can probably see on the screen at the moment, there's a nice little picture with 4 students. One has a little eye, one has an ear, one has a hand, and one has notes. And this is to sort of highlight what some of the different ways of learning are. Now, for those of you who may be familiar with what I'm sort of alluding to, a lot of literature suggests that everyone has a predominant learning style. And that learning style fits into one of 3 categories. It could be that you're an auditory learner. It could very well be that you are a visual learner. Or it could be that you're a kinetic learner. Now, just as a quick show of hands, who has heard of those terms before? You could have heard of one of those terms, all those terms, or none of those terms. I just want to see what you guys have heard before. Maybe you already know what type of learner you are. Maybe you'll find out what type of learner you are in this session. Either way, it's a win-win situation for you, because by the end of the session, you'll have a bit of a better understanding as to how you can utilize that more effectively when it comes to studying. So the DIS expert has said two of them. So you've heard of two of those terms before. Brilliant. Great to hear that you've heard of those terms before. Which ones have you heard before? Sophia, you've said one of them. Okay, brilliant. Let me know, which one have you heard before? Lyrics has said you've heard of them in school in form time. All right, brilliant. So it is something that they still talk about in school. I'm always conscious of the fact that I might say, oh, you might have heard about this in school, and it shows my age because they don't do that anymore. No, great to see that they're still sort of teaching this kind of stuff in school. Visual and auditory is what the expert has heard of before, so brilliant. Brilliant that you've heard of those terms before. And T-World says same. Those are the ones that you know as well. Fantastic. It's great to see that a lot of you already know what I'm talking about. But even if you didn't, not a problem at all, because we're going to talk about it a little more anyway. So let's move on to the next slide then. Now, learning styles, okay, it's thought, okay, a few very, very intelligent individuals took a few individuals and they looked at how they retained information and how they processed information. And what they found actually was that information enters the brain through three different methods: sight, hearing, and touch. And the one that we use the most is our learning style. Now, one of the things I want to tell all of you is that I'm not going to use the phrase your only learning style, because the reality is you may have a combination. You might have a mixture. So reading through the chat, it was really, really clear that a lot of you have different ways in which you study. And some of those ways fit very comfortably into visual. Some of them fit very nicely into kinetic or tactile. And some of them fit very nicely into auditory. And some of them sort of merge between categories. And so you might be wondering, well, what if I don't belong to just one category? What if I belong to multiple? And the simple answer to that is there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. The important thing is you learn which learning styles are your strong point, and then you utilize them to the best of your ability. That's what we're really focusing on here in today's study squad. Now, just out of curiosity, which learning style do all of you think you are? If you think it's just the one, then pop in the chat, it's just this one. If you think you're a combination, by all means, tell me which combination of learning styles you think you belong to. Or, here's a wild card, let me know if you don't think you belong to any of them. It does happen, okay? It does happen. Every one of you students in the room, and every one of you students watching this back, if you're not watching this live, you all learn in very different and special ways. And what we want to try and do is champion that. We want to ensure that you know how you learn, and so you feel more empowered to learn that way. So the expert has said auditory. So you think you're an auditory learner? That's brilliant. Okay. Emma and May are not too sure. Well, hopefully by the end of the session, you might have identified which one you are. And then that way, you're then able to maybe study more effectively. Sophia, you've said visual, but you also like making notes. So maybe you're a combination of visual and kinetic. So a combination, okay? And again, it's just about maximizing that. Lyrics, you said visual and tactile, so probably very similar to Sophia. Maybe very similar to how Sophia learns. Isaac has said auditory, so just like the expert. And Millie is a bit of each. Excellent. Okay. And T, you said that you think auditory, but you find it hard sometimes, because if you're revising continuously, active recall helps you to listen to what you're saying and seeing if you get the answer correct. I also get that, and I think what we've all sort of established here this evening is that in some instances it's very clear to see what type of learner you are, but in other instances it's a bit tricky to figure out what type of learner you are because sometimes you're a combination of all of them. Sometimes you're a combination of just two. Again, that is absolutely fine. The important thing is that you feel confident in how you learn. I think one of the most challenging things for all of you as students, because this is something that I found challenging, and if you agree with me, pop a yes in the chat. One of the most challenging things is knowing whether you're studying correctly or not. Am I right or am I wrong in saying that? In saying that one of the most challenging things is knowing whether you're studying correctly or not. Right? Sometimes you might be sat there thinking, am I actually retaining any of this information? Am I understanding any of this information? And honestly, I'll go a step further. I think the challenging thing is that answer always, or that question rather, always crops up after an exam. Okay? Now, here's a story that I've told on some of the earlier live streams. I do encourage you to check all those ones out. But it was when I was in year 12, and I was doing my first ever Edexcel Chemistry Unit 1 mock exam. And I spent the whole evening the night before, no word of a lie, reading through this textbook over and over again. I can remember vividly reading chapters 1 to 6, right? And I would try and memorize it as much as possible. But in the end, I found that my results didn't reflect the amount of reading that I did. And that just got me thinking, am I studying correctly? Now, I know when I told that story, some of you in the past have actually sort of agreed with that story. Some of you have actually experienced that firsthand or can relate to it. And just reading the chat at the moment, I can see that May and Lyrics have both said that yes, that is one of the more challenging things as a student, knowing whether you're studying correctly or not. Well, the simple answer is that there's never really one right way of studying. What I found in my experience from GCSE to A-level to uni, and even now past uni, where I look at postgraduate things, I'm looking at postgraduate prospects, is that there is no one surefire way to study correctly. The right way to study is based on you. It's based on how your mind works, how you retain information, how you process information. Really, the important thing is identifying that. And I think that can be really challenging because in some instances, you don't even know where to start in how to identify that in the first place. Am I saying the right things? Are we all in agreement? Pop a yes or a yup or even just a thumbs up in the chat if all of you agree with me. It'll be really interesting as well to see what some of your experiences have been. Under what circumstances have you always, or sort of, under what circumstances have you thought to yourself, am I studying correctly? Has it been after an exam? Has it been before an exam? Has it just been throughout the year? Maybe it's in class where you feel like everyone else is retaining information and you're not. It's different for many, many students, and that's really, really challenging. And that's actually part of the reason why my tutor puts together these study squads, so that you feel as though you have someone to relate to and someone who can guide you on how to study more effectively. And that's why I'm here. I can see a good few yeses in the chat. T, this expert, Sophia, and Millie have all said yes. And even though as you go between each year, things don't change very much. Students often find the same things difficult. But that's why you have tutors, and that's why you have teachers who can support you in that journey as being a student. There we go. Chamomile tea, very, very relaxing. T has said that when you get your results back and you don't get the best mark, you always question the way that you revise. And some subjects it does work, and some subjects it doesn't work. Well, that is a very, very good point. Not all subjects are the same. And I think this is especially the case where you do a combination of the sciences, let's say things like English and history, maybe essay-style subjects. The way that you study doesn't always work for all subjects. And that doesn't necessarily mean there's anything wrong with how you're studying. It doesn't necessarily mean there's anything wrong with you. It just means you need to look at how you can optimize how you study while still being honest to what your learning style is. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on. Lyrics has said that usually it's when you do past papers and at the end of the class, and that's when you question it. Totally understandable, very relatable. Uh, Emma has said that you often spend a lot of time revising, but revision is not very efficient. Okay, it would be really, really interesting to sort of talk a little bit about why you feel it's inefficient. So do make sure to stay towards the end of the stream. I always have a short little Q&A session towards the end where you can ask me any questions and we can have more of a discussion. So do stay towards the end. But let's get into looking at some learning styles. But before we do, how is everyone enjoying the stream? Bar the technical difficulties at the very beginning. Is everyone enjoying the stream? Is everyone finding it useful? Does anyone have any questions at this point? Do pop some answers in the chat. Let me know whether you're finding it useful. Let me know whether you're enjoying it. And let me know whether you're going to tune in to future Study Squad sessions. It'll be great to see all of you there. T, you said that it does help with a massive heart. Thank you. I'm aware of the fact that I'm not always the best at doing this, but it's great to see that you're finding it useful, and it's great to see that you're enjoying the live stream. Thank you for joining. I always make a point to say this, but there is never truly a live stream without viewers. So it's brilliant for you guys to tune in because it gives me the opportunity to support you as students. So let's get moving on to the next slide where we talk a little bit about learning styles. May also says that it helps. I'm glad it helps, May. I'm glad to see that you're getting the support that you need and that you deserve. And that goes for all of you as students. You all deserve support so that you can be the best student that you can be. And that's what we're all here to achieve. So, for visual learners. Now, visual learners generally prefer to see information like pictures, diagrams, or cartoons. Now, I remember personally when I did GCSE history, I was really into anime at the time, and there was one where they personified different countries as different characters. So to help me remember the interactions between different countries pre-World War I, I'd actually print that out and then stick it in my exercise book. And that helped me when I was writing notes. So I suppose at the time I was a bit of a visual learner. So if you do something similar, then I'd encourage you to do that. To draw pictures and diagrams. Emma and Lyrics, I'm glad that you've also found the stream really, really useful, and it will be great to see you next week as well at the same time at 5 o'clock. Right, now with visual learners, I think the other important thing as well to remember is that it's not just about knowing how to optimize your studying in terms of what to do, it's also about knowing what not to do and knowing about what things can take away from your effectiveness. So for instance, visual learners might find that they get easily distracted during a lecture without any visual aids. So for instance, you might find that, if I was just sort of talking at you for a while, you might find that you're not retaining information that much, and that's not your fault. I remember as an undergraduate, there was one particular series of lectures, I'm not going to get into which ones, where I would zone out, and it would just be because there were these massive blocks of text on the PowerPoint, and I concentrated as much as I could, but it just didn't click. Now, as a student, it's really easy to then get into the mindset that there's something wrong with you because you're not focusing, but that's not the case. The reality is you may just be a visual learner and you may not click with large pieces of text without visual aids. So for all of you visual learners in the chat, or for visual learners or part visual learners, do yourselves a favor and make use of images, make use of diagrams, make use of colors as well. Okay, use things that are going to support you. So for you visual learners in the chat, just type something that you're going to do differently. Either draw diagrams or maybe draw more diagrams. Maybe use more colors. I know stationery is super expensive, but there is no better feeling than getting a really cool stationery set full of a rainbow and assortment of colors. So maybe introduce more color to your notes when you're writing them. Maybe use more graphs. Maybe print things off and add them to your notes. So it'd be really interesting in the chat for you visual learners to share at some point, not necessarily now, what you're going to do differently. So T. Worrell, you said that you're going to highlight keywords and things you feel like you need to remember. That's brilliant. Treat yourself to a nice set of highlighters. I, for one, I'm always a sucker for pastel colors. Absolutely love pastel colors. So if I get a highlighter set, there's always like pastel blue, pastel purple, pastel pink. So brilliant, brilliant strategy to try and employ there. And what you'll find is that what you need to highlight and remember, you will figure out as you go along. You're always developing how you learn. And that's something that goes for all of you as well. Do not have this expectation that you'll know how to study effectively from the get-go. Studying and learning, they are all gradual things that develop over time. And your study style and how effectively you study will evolve with time as you grow as individuals. So don't be afraid to try new things. Millie also says same, brilliant. Sophia says printing images and diagrams, also excellent choice. Lyric says diagrams and colors. And Sophia says making color-coded mind maps, brilliant. These are all brilliant tactics to use, guys, and I have no doubt that when you use them, you are going to find that your studying is a lot more effective. And T. Worrell, glad to see we're on the same page. Pastel colors are indeed amazing. That's actually one of the reasons why I love designing these PowerPoints, because my tutor loved pastel colors as well. Right, so let's get moving on to the next type of learner. Auditory learners. Auditory learners prefer to hear information spoken. Now, I know some of you in the chat earlier were talking a little bit about how sometimes saying things back to yourself helps you remember things. And that is understandable for me as well. I remember when it was year 12, so I know a lot of my stories seem to be in year 12. I remember that we would have little study sessions. And what I would do is I would explain concepts to my friends. We would all take turns. We'd all assign each other a concept to sort of teach everyone else. And that's something I also did as an undergraduate. And what I actually found was that sometimes listening to other people explain things in a different way to a textbook or a teacher helped me retain information more. Sometimes hearing myself explain things back also helped me retain information and helped me understand things. So auditory learners, you might not need detailed notes to learn. Now, again, you might not be a pure auditory learner. It may be that you do really well with retaining information when you hear it, but you still like detailed notes there as a backup. There is nothing wrong with that whatsoever. That is A-okay. And if you feel like you're that type of person, then have those notes going as well. Even try employing some of the techniques from a visual learner's bank of tips and tricks. Use highlighters, use some pastel highlighters specifically. Auditory learners may avoid eye contact in order to concentrate. So it could very well be that if you're an auditory learner, you might find that maybe group work doesn't necessarily work the best for you. What I would do occasionally, depending on the subject, was for those of you who like listening to YouTube videos that sort of explain things, I, for one, have a personal favourite for Hank Green. I thought he was brilliant for biology, and I listened to him loads during A-level. Sometimes what I would do is put my headphones in and listen to YouTube explanations while writing notes, and that would be complete independent study, and that would help me loads. So if you feel like that applies to you, by all means, take advantage of that too. And you might also read aloud to yourself. So, For you auditory learners in the chat, whether you're partially an auditory learner or a complete auditory learner, what do you think you're going to do differently after this stream? What are you going to do to maximize your studying? Emma, you've actually asked a very good question. How do you make sure you don't waste time just making notes pretty? I think that's a very good question, and I think it's a question that a lot of students ask. Now, here I am talking a little bit about how it's important that if you're a visual learner, you use colour. But on the other hand, you don't want to feel so you're wasting time highlighting things for the sake of highlighting things. Firstly, ask yourself, what is the point of introducing colour? Normally, when the brain sees colour, we tend to focus on that first. So if, let's say, we'll take biology as an example, where there are loads of keywords to get those marks in exam papers, it could very well be that you're highlighting specific phrases that you know come up in mark schemes over time and time again. So from that respect, I would say that you're not wasting time making your notes pretty. But on the other hand, if you find that you're adding loads and loads of colour to everything, then I think you then have to ask yourself, well, what is the purpose of me adding that colour? Now, for some students, making notes pretty isn't necessarily a waste of time. Right? Notes have to be aesthetically pleasing to retain that information. For other students, that's not the case. And for some students, it's somewhere in the middle. So I think it depends on you. Ask yourself, why am I personally adding colour to my notes? If you're adding colour to your notes to focus on specific things, then you know that if you then deviate from that and you can't justify that deviation, then you may very well be wasting time. On the other hand, if you do deviate from that standard and you think, actually, this is important because of X, Y, and Z, like Lyrics has just said, for instance, if his notes, or their notes, I should say, sorry, if their notes don't look neat, it puts you off, then you can then justify introducing more colour around other things that aren't just the key phrases. I hope that answers your question, Emma. Let me know if it does. If it doesn't, then I'll be more than happy to talk a little bit more towards the end of the stream as well. But yes, so like I mentioned before, for you auditory learners, you don't necessarily need to say it now, but tell me a few ways in which you're going to try and optimize your studying by implementing more auditory techniques. Let me know what all of you think. What are some of the things that you might do? Interestingly enough, in the last session, I talked a little bit about how I need music, for instance. Now, the music isn't necessarily audio to do with the subject, but it's background music, and it helps sort of add to establishing a good working environment. So it might be the same for you. If it is, by all means, let me know in the chat. It'd be very interesting to see how many other music listeners there are when it comes to studying. Perfect. And like I said, don't necessarily need to answer the question now. You can answer it towards the end of the stream as well. But we're going to move on very swiftly onto kinetic learners or tactile learners. Now, for those of you who are tactile or kinetic learners, you may prefer touch as your primary mode for taking in information. Okay, and now for kinetic learners, writing notes out may be your primary mode or mode of action. And you may even find that role-playing helps you learn things more efficiently. Now, you might be thinking, well, how exactly could I role-play subject stuff? Okay, how could I role-play that to help me understand it a bit more? I'm going to give you an example, and I'm going to use chemistry as an example because I teach biology and chemistry. I want all of you to think back to when you do chemistry, or if you still do chemistry, and I want you to all try and answer a question in the chat right now. What happens to molecules when I increase the temperature? What happens to them? Doesn't have to be a really, really long answer. It can be a really, really short answer too. Like I said before, Completely safe space, no one will judge you. Do have a go at answering that question. So, what is it that happens to molecules when you increase the temperature of something? So let's say, for instance, I've got a glass of water, and let's say, maybe not a glass of water, that might, if I put it on a stove, the glass would crack. So not glass, let's say a mug. Well, let's say I've got a mug of water, I put it on the stove or something, and what happens then? So Monster Killer, so thank you for joining this evening, has said they get denatured. So that's not entirely incorrect, because technically enzymes are molecules, and after a certain temperature they do denature. And if we're talking about biological molecules, they do denature after certain temperatures. So great to see that you're thinking in a more biology aspect. That is still correct. So thank you for that contribution. Isaac T, and May, you've all sort of said what I was thinking about. The idea that they all vibrate faster, they move more quickly. Now, how can you roleplay that? Well, get a few of you, okay? And let's say you all walk around really, really slowly around each other, okay? And that might be at a temperature of 15 degrees Celsius, just a bit under room temperature. Now, let's say you double the temperature. You could roleplay that by running around more quickly and maybe colliding into each other, obviously safely, in a completely safe environment. We don't want anyone injuring themselves. But that could be a really, really good way of role-playing how temperature affects molecules in chemistry. If you didn't want to do that, you could also get maybe some beads or something, put them in a jar. And you could shake the jar really, really slowly if the temperature's really low. And if the temperature's really, really high, you could shake the jar more quickly. So that's another thing that you could utilize there in terms of learning how temperature affects molecules. Lyrics, you are correct. They do gain more energy. So well done there. Thank you for that contribution. So, for all of you kinetic learners out there, what do you think you might do differently? Do you think you'll try and employ role-playing more in your studying, maybe with other colleagues at school? Do you think you'll just stick to writing notes out? Because that's also a really good way of retaining information. That's always my go-to, to the point where I tend to rewrite my notes over and over again because it tends to help me retain information. You can create study sheets as well. And again, just to remind all of you, you can use techniques from other aspects. So if you're a kinetic learner and you like to write notes, but you still like colour, then by all means, incorporate some colour into your notes. T, you said that you're going to create brain dumps and study sheets. That sounds like an excellent plan. Good on you for utilising that. May said that you're going to rewrite your notes. Definitely agree with you. That's something I've always done. When it came to my registration exam as a pharmacist, I rewrote my notes God knows how many times. I think I've got 3 folders worth that say essentially the same thing. But even when you rewrite your notes, what's really interesting is that they change ever so slightly, and then you might even feel like your notes become more efficient as you keep rewriting them. So that's absolutely brilliant. Right, so we're going to move on. Now, just as a bit of a quick recap, for those of you who weren't able to join the first live stream, I urge you to go and re-watch it after this one, because it talks a little bit about SMART goals. Now, in terms of SMART goals, let's see, how exactly your learning style or maximizing or utilizing your learning style can help you in terms of ensuring that the goals that you have already set are actually attainable. Quick questions to answer it. Emma, what age group is this aimed at? Anywhere between GCSE and A-level, although I suppose it could also apply to Key Stage 3, but you may not necessarily be writing notes as much at Key Stage 3, or there might not be an emphasis at it. But I would say that knowing your learning style is applicable from GCSE all the way up to undergrad, and you could probably even use it beyond then if you were going to pursue any further learning. So, totally applicable. Um, Now, with SMART goals, we talked a little bit about how it's really important that your goals are specific, that they're measurable, attainable, relevant to you, and that they are also time bound. Okay? Now, utilizing your learning style, I would say fits really, really nicely in terms of your goals being attainable and your goals also being relevant to you and also making them more specific. Let's say, for instance, you wanted to learn a little bit more about, we had enzymes mentioned in the chat earlier. So let's say you want to learn a bit about enzymes. Now, that's quite broad. So in terms of making that goal more specific, you could tailor that goal based on what works best for you. So let's say, for instance, you are let's say you're a visual learner, you might find that drawing out a picture of an enzyme is more useful to you, and you can even use some color to show where the prosthetic groups are and where the active site is. If you are a kinetic learner, you might find that writing loads and loads of notes and mind maps is really useful in terms of learning about enzymes. And if you are an auditory learner, you might find that a YouTube video or a podcast explaining about enzymes and how they work might be more useful to you as well. So that's how your goals then become more specific. In terms of attainable, well, I think that's self-explanatory. If you ensure that the way you study is more efficient for you, your goals become more attainable because there's a lack of resistance in terms of you retaining that information. And relevant, well, we want to ensure that when you're studying, you understand its relevance to you. So if you study in a way that suits you best and helps you work more efficiently, then your goal will feel more relevant and you'll feel more motivation to fulfill that goal. Does that make sense for everyone? Do put a yes in the chat if it does, put a no in the chat if it doesn't, and I'm more than happy to re-explain. So Lyrics, you said that last year you found it really hard to revise for your citizenship GCSE. At the time, you used to play Jenga all the time, so you wrote questions on the blocks and played Jenga, and it helped your revision lots. That is a really, really brilliant technique, and it's a testament to show that there is no one way of studying effectively. Me, for instance, I'm completely hopeless at Jenga, so I don't know whether I'd be able to apply that technique. But it worked for you, and that's the important thing. Everyone has their own way of studying, and so if you figure out what that way is, you can then apply that more effectively with much better results. I hope that makes sense to everyone. Let's see. Now it's nearly 5 to 6, so I'm conscious of the fact that, well, we started late, so we might go over a little bit. But May, you said yes. I'm glad to see that that's made sense to you at the very least. That's good. That's good. Do pop a yes if that's made sense to everyone as well. And if so, we will get stuck into a bit of the take-home message, really. It's all about creating a learning style that works best for you. Like I mentioned at the very beginning of the session, there is no one right way of studying. Okay, what's important is that you identify what your learning style is and you utilize that. And also be open to change. When you're at GCSE, your learning style may predominantly be auditory. But as you move on to A-level, you might find that your learning style becomes more kinetic. Maybe you already realize it's a combination of the two. So ultimately, what I want all of you to sort of take away from this study squad is, firstly, don't be afraid to experiment with different learning styles so that you can find the one that works best for you. The second thing I want to sort of take away is that as you find a learning style that works for you, let that grow, nurture it, okay? Let it evolve as you develop as a student. That's the important thing. And I hope that makes sense for everyone. thank you for tuning in this evening. Again, I am super sorry about the glitches towards the beginning of the session. Now I know what the issue is. I can make sure that doesn't happen next Thursday. So it would be great to see all of you here next Thursday at 5 p.m. Just because I'm conscious of the fact that this stream is technically only gone for 45 minutes. I will stick around towards the end, like I always do, have a quick Q&A. Again, as a quick reminder, do make sure to check out the other study squads that happen on a weekly basis. So you can join Olivia at 5 p.m. on a Monday for math skills, and you can join Fliss on a Tuesday at 5 p.m. for coding skills. Really interesting study squads from both of them. They're both brilliant, talented tutors. And I would definitely encourage all of you to check them out in terms of their study squads. If you haven't already, they're all recorded as well, so if you want to watch them back, you can also check the My Tutor YouTube channel. Also, before you leave the stream this evening, do make sure to fill in the survey that My Tutor has just popped in the live chat. There is a chance to win a £20 voucher, which you can use to hopefully treat yourself to some pastel highlighters. So do make sure to check that out as well. And finally, thank you for joining again. I will be sticking around for maybe about 10-15 minutes or so. And, just to answer any questions. T, thank you for the tips. We'll be joining the session regularly to help with revision. Thank you for joining, and I'm glad that you found it really useful. If there is anything that I want all of you students to take away from my study squad sessions, it's a sense of motivation, and it is a sense of knowledge that you are capable of improving the way that you study to achieve whatever your aspirational grades are, or whenever your aspirations are, grades aside. That's the one thing I want you to take away from these sessions. So I'm glad you found it useful. Lyrics, you've also said thank you, and I'm glad that you found it really useful. I am going to stick around for a couple more minutes or so. I did say 10 to 15. Again, before you leave, do make sure to fill in that survey. There is a chance to win £20. Which you can hopefully use on some stationery. Do check out Olivia and Fliss's live streams on a Monday and a Tuesday at 5 p.m. And do check in for my live stream next Thursday at 5 p.m. Where there will not be as many or any tech glitches. Millie, you said thank you. You're more than welcome. Emma, I'm glad you found it useful as well. Thank you for joining. Lyrics has asked, is the maths one an A-level or GCSE one? That's actually a very good question. I think it may be GCSE, but I would have to just pass that over to the moderator to answer that question, just for accuracy. Still worth checking out all the same, though. I think it might be GCSE, but double check. It might be a combination of the two. T has a question. You have to do an assessment, and now you've got 25% of extra time for all your exams. What does that mean, and how does it work? So, if you have extra time, I would presume that means you've just got more time to actually finish the assessment. So, let's say, for instance, the exam is normally an hour. If you have an extra 25%, then the exam will last an hour and 15 minutes. What I'd probably recommend is when you're in school tomorrow, ask your teacher of that relevant subject what that means for you, because it then means that when it comes to revision, you can then prep yourself knowing that you've got that extra time. I hope that answers your question, T. May has asked, how frequently should you revise a topic or concept once you've learned it the first time? This is a very good question. And I think, again, it depends. I tend to say that going over it at least 2 or 3 times is useful. And I always compare it to whenever you do Duke of Edinburgh, for instance, or whenever you go hiking. The first time you hike somewhere, there's no path. right? Because no one's been there before, complete uncharted territory, and so it's quite difficult to navigate where you're going. The second time you walk in the same place, the same trail, then you kind of can recognize footsteps from before. And then the third and the fourth time, you definitely know where you're going, and your brain's the exact same. The more times you revisit a concept, the better your brain will be at revisiting the same pathways that it used before to get to that relevant information. And so that's really important when it comes to exams, because a lot of your exams are recall and some of them are application. And so what you want to do in your preparation for your exam is facilitate the means to allow you to get to that information that's required more efficiently, especially under time constraints. Now, I did the sciences predominantly for A-level. For GCSE, my options were history, geography, economics, and French. So whenever it came to revisiting concepts, at least 3 times, but that was for me. Everyone's different, and I suppose it also depends on what type of learner you are. I would definitely say more than twice, but keep revisiting it to the point where you feel confident in retaining that information. I hope that answers your question. T, I'm glad that answered your question. You're more than welcome. And Lyrics, you said because you're doing GCSE this year. I do think, seeing some of the titles and watching some of the content, I think it is GCSE. But I would just double check. You can contact my tutor and they can clarify. Just don't want to give you incorrect information. I'm fairly certain it's GCSE content though. May, I'm glad you found that useful. You are more than welcome. So, does anyone else have any questions, or does anyone else have any interesting plans for tomorrow? And just like that, T has said that you've got a computer science test tomorrow. You're nervous. Nervousness is understandable. Okay, I think it's completely normal to be nervous before a test. All I can say is all the best for the test tomorrow. Do the very best that you can. Go into it, and depending on how you walk out, if you feel like it went well, that'd be great. And if you feel it didn't go well, that's also okay. Mock exams, mini tests, they are all an opportunity for you to identify your strengths and weaknesses, and then you can tailor your studying to addressing those weaknesses and championing those strengths, because that's also important to do. So all the best for the computer science test tomorrow. Hopefully it goes well, fingers crossed. And even if it doesn't go well, that's okay, because you'll have the opportunity to learn from that. Emma, you've said that you don't know how you best revise, but you have lots of exams soon, so you've not got time to find your correct technique. Okay, so I guess my first question is, what has sort of worked for you in the past? If you found that writing notes for you in the past is useful, then by all means keep writing notes. Me personally, I tend to find that I use my notes and past papers. So I'll try a set of past paper questions on a certain topic that I want to study. And then depending on my marks, I'll then know, okay, well, am I not getting the marks I want because of a lack of knowledge of content? Or is it because my exam technique is off? I think as you get closer and closer to exams, the way you study tends to gear towards more notes and past paper questions anyway. So if you feel like you don't have a lot of time, I would definitely encourage you to start making revision notes if you haven't already. Start using past paper questions and start going back over past paper questions. I actually have a session on past paper questions later on. I've said that 3 times. I've said the word past paper questions 3 times. I think one of the pitfalls that students fall into is doing a set of past paper questions and then not looking back at them or using them to inform their studying. So definitely do that if you haven't been doing that already. Lyrics, you've asked, how can you use your mock scores to help you with revision? So, looking at your mock scores, if you've got access to the actual paper, I think that's a really good place to start. Firstly, ask yourself, well, is the mock score roundabout where I want it to be? You can then ask yourself, if it's not, why? And really dig deep, delve deep in terms of the questions you ask yourself, and ask yourself, well, what could I have done better and what did I do well? If the reality is that you didn't do loads of revision before the mock, well, then you know where to start. You just need to spend time going over the content and reinforcing that knowledge. If you felt like you spent adequate time going over content in your own time and making sure you reinforce that knowledge, then it could be that your exam technique's off. And that's when you would then look at your mock paper and you would look at the mark scheme and see, okay, well, I said this, but they wanted this word, or I missed this phrase. Okay, and what you then find is you then use your mock results to help you with revision. And when you've gone back and you reviewed that paper, don't be afraid after a while to try the same paper again to see whether or not you get a better score and whether the skills that you've adapted have helped you. I hope that answers that question. Emma, you've said that previously you've been good at revising a few pages of information for the exam, but for GCSEs, you can't do that as it's too much info. Okay, so I think that's a fairly good point. I think GCSEs can be really challenging purely because of the volume of information you need to remember. And what I would say is this is where you should pace yourself, okay? Don't try and cram everything in one go. Give yourself the time to learn things gradually, okay? It could very well be that if you don't do it already, maybe set regular time in the week aside for you to study more effectively, for you to revisit all that information. If you don't do that already, that is. So what I would say is that if you haven't already, make regular slots in which you study and you keep going over content. Okay? What I would say is try and be as independent as you can be. The more independent you are, the more confident you'll feel in knowing what to revise and how much to revise. How do sometimes some students do well in an assessment without a lot of revision? That's a very good question, and that's actually a question I asked myself. I still thoroughly believe that everyone needs to revise to some extent, but everyone's different. Not all students have to revise the same amount, and everyone revises differently. I suppose this really reinforces how different we all are and how important it is to revise in a way that works best for us. For me, I've been able to figure out that my go-to is write notes, watch YouTube videos. When I'm writing notes, I listen to instrumental music that's really calm and relaxed, and I practice past paper questions. That's what's worked for me. But I also know that there are other people who don't necessarily write many notes and they just do past paper questions. So it really depends. But I still think that everyone has to study to some extent, but everyone's different. What I would say is don't necessarily focus on the amount of revision that someone else is doing. In some instances, it can be really off-putting and it can get you really anxious about how much you are studying or how much you're not studying. Find something that works best for you, something that works best for your schedule, any extracurricular activities that you might have going on. It's all about balance, okay? It's all about making sure that you take care of yourself while you're studying. Lyrics, you've got mocks at the end of this month. I wish you all the best. I think you will be fine, okay? Just give them a good go. Like I mentioned before, at the end of the day, mock exams aren't there to catch you out. Mock exams are there for you to reinforce what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, okay? And when you get your mock results back, you can then think about a strategy. Okay, like these subjects, for instance, I'm fine with, but these ones, not so much. So what can I do to get these subjects over here? That might have been the other way around, but you get what I'm trying to get across. Okay? Use them as an opportunity for you to learn. Use them as an opportunity for you to revise. And then when you get your results back, you can then reflect on how you can improve that study technique. I do have a session on past paper questions and writing notes later on in the Study Squad series, Study Skills series, so do tune in for that. T. Worrell has shared some words of wisdom which I wholeheartedly agree with. Mock exams are only practice, so try your best and that's all that matters. And when you're done with mocks, treat yourself. I would definitely agree to that. Now, I, at the moment, I'm doing an audit for work. And my way of treating myself once I've done that audit is buying a copy of Sonic Frontiers, which comes out in, oh gosh, I think 5 days. So that's my treat to myself. When you all have mock exams, it's really, really important that you, like I said before, you use them as an opportunity to practice and you do your best with them. If they go well, brilliant, you know what you're doing well. And if they don't necessarily go the way you wanted them to, that's also okay, because you've had the opportunity to learn. That mock exam was an opportunity for you to identify where you need to work a bit more or what you need to change in how you work. Rather a mock exam than the real exam. That mock exam gives you the knowledge you need, so between the mock and the real thing, you've got plenty of time to change and optimize how you study. Additionally, remember that your mock exam is not the only past paper that you can do. You can go on your exam board's website and access loads of past papers there for free with the marks team and with the examiner's report. There are also really, really good websites like Physics and Maths Tutor, where you can get past paper questions and past papers all for free. They're all free access. So don't feel as though you'll only get one mock and that's one opportunity for you to identify your strengths and weaknesses. You will have many more opportunities to do those. You just need to identify those opportunities for yourselves. I hope that makes sense and I hope that's helpful. And with that, that is the end of my chamomile tea. Very, very upsetting, but it's fine. I can always make more chamomile tea if I need to. Let's see. Excellent. You're more than welcome to the session. I'm glad that you're going to go and revise. All the best with the revision. I'm sure you'll smash it. And lyrics, you're more than welcome. You are more than welcome. I think what we're now going to do is we're going to wind down the session a little bit. We're going to wind it down to a close. But thank all of you for joining this evening. Again, super, super sorry about the technical difficulties at the beginning of the live stream. I will fix a few things so that does not happen next Thursday. But like I said before, do make sure to check out Olivia and Fliss's live streams. They are Monday and Tuesday at 5 p.m. respectively. If you haven't already, do make sure to fill in that survey. There is a chance to win £20. And I will hopefully see all of you next Thursday at the same time at 5 p.m. For another study skill session. The next session that we have is all about, let me check my schedule. Study squads. Let's have a look. So, next week is all about, what have I got here? Time management skills. Quite ironic when you think about how I lost 15 minutes of time due to technical difficulties. But next week's going to be all about time management. So if you do want to learn a little bit more about why time management is important, how you can actually utilize time management in your studying, be it revision, then do join next week. If you know any other friends, any other students that also need help with time management, do ask them to join the live stream as well. They can sign up via my tutor. I can see that Lyrics is also going because you've got an exam tomorrow morning. All the best for the exam tomorrow morning. And everyone, thank you so much for joining. Have a lovely, lovely evening. All of you take care, stay safe, and I will see all of you next Thursday at 5 p.m. for another study skills session. But the aim here is to help you be the best student that you can be. Okay, bye everyone. Take care.